One of the questions that I get asked the most when people find out that I work with introverts, empaths, and highly sensitive people is how do I actually get anything done? Yep, I'm talking about overthinking, and I've got some thoughts for you. Overthinking. This is probably one of the biggest #introvert challenges that we face as highly sensitive introverted people. Yep, you get an idea, you get really excited about it, you start to think it through because you're an internal processor, and then all of a sudden that little voice pops up in your head and is like, oh, that sounds terrible, oh, that's awful, oh, you're shit, oh, what are people gonna think, oh, what if you fail, blah, 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 blah. It is one of the most common questions that I get asked about as a coach for introverts, highly sensitive people, and empaths. And probably one of the biggest things that I myself have had to work with and that I work with most of my clients about. We, as internal processors, have this incredible ability to be creative, to have big visions, to be able to dive into worlds that are all of our own creation. But we also have a really innate ability to destroy and talk down every single idea that we have as well. And this can make it really hard to put ourselves out into the world, to share something with other people, to even just live through an experience and not spend the rest of our lives thinking about it at 3 o'clock in the morning, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I said that. So, what I want to share with you are some thoughts about some things that I have learned over the years that have really come to help me understand where the overthinking is coming from and how to kind of work with it, knowing that there is a very good possibility that any idea that I have, any conversation that I need to have or want to have or have had is going to have to be processed through my little brain noggin there. I read a really interesting thing earlier this year that overthinking is actually an indication that we have a closed heart. Now, I've always associated overthinking with being an introvert and therefore an internal processor. But this idea of having a closed heart is very synonymous with being highly sensitive. Why? Because high sensitivity means that we are more prone to feeling things more deeply, and as a result, we start to protect ourselves from that hurt and pain. It could come from early childhood, dealing with certain kinds of traumas and experiences throughout growing up stages that we've just learnt to curl over and protect our soft little squishy hearts from the world. It could be something that we've inherited that's part of our DNA that comes from being not only highly sensitive but carrying the weight of other things from our ancestral lines. It can come from just personal experiences and emotions that we've gone through that we've never really fully dealt with in our bodies and in our lives as well. Now, if you're a highly sensitive person, I've got this question for you. Do you have neck and shoulder issues? I know I have my whole life dealt with neck and shoulder issues, and as a result, you will sometimes see that you curl your shoulders forward and your neck goes forward as well. This has two factors to it. One is very much that our head going forward is a sign of worrying about the future. And the curved shoulders is an immediate sign of curling over to protect our hearts. So this idea of overthinking as a result of closing our hearts down is really interesting to me because, like I said, I always thought being an introvert, meaning that I was internally processing and I was thinking and calling on all of the ways that something might not work or fail or could have been done better or any of those things, actually has some sense in being highly sensitive as well. And as a result of not wanting to be hurt, of wanting to protect my heart, this has led to just being in that space of overthinking all of the time, of putting our heads in the driver's seat instead of leading from our hearts because we're trying to protect ourselves from pain and suffering and struggle. So I found that to be really interesting. And what we can do as a result of trying to get out of our heads is to actually learn to come back into our bodies. Now, this can maybe seem like a really strange thing to say or to try and understand how to do, but that could be as simple as actually just closing down our eyes, taking a few deep breaths and actually just really consciously moving from all of this noise that's going on up here and dropping down to focus on what's going on in here. Now, it might sound a bit woo-woo, but it's actually just coming back into our bodies, because as introverted people, as overthinkers, as internal processors, we can very much cut off our bodies because we've just let our brain do all of the work. And so one of the best things that I've learned is to actually come back into my body and start to notice how that frantic overthinking starts to actually have less power when we really take our focus off it. But before I go further with that, I just also want to really acknowledge that sometimes we don't know that that's happened yet. And sometimes that frantic energy and that kind of nervousness, stress and anxiety is already so far advanced before we realize that, oh, I've been thinking all of these thoughts and it's actually making things worse. But the second that we start to identify that, that is when we can just stop, kind of breathe, come back out of our heads into our bodies. This will look different for everyone. I know lots of people recommend meditation. This may or may not be something that's your jam. And if it's not, that's totally fine. But really finding something. It might be taking a few deep breaths. It might be putting on some music and dancing around your house. It might just be sitting quietly somewhere and just not doing anything, just observing what's going on around you. But the quicker that we can kind of move out of our heads and actually drop back into our bodies, a new level of calm will start to come over us. So that's one way to really kind of move through overthinking. Focusing on our hearts, focusing on coming out of our heads and back into our bodies. You might even find that lying on the floor on a rolled up towel, just with your arms out, actually starts to take pressure off the neck and shoulders and allows that heart to open before it feels really ready to do so. It's a really safe kind of way to start exploring opening our hearts up and getting out of our head so that we can start to move forward, start to take action, start to have conversations and do things from a place of our hearts as opposed to overthinking things and destroying them and making them out into these huge, big, overwhelming situations long before they've actually happened. So I'd love to hear from you. Please let me know if you've tried this or if you try it and it's helpful for you. Please let me know what your favorite way of getting out of your head and getting back into action is. And if there are any questions that you have about overthinking, about opening your heart, about moving into your body, anything at all, please drop me a comment below or email info@katherinemackenziesmith.com, and I would love to be able to talk more with you about this.